Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Again, I had a little bit of an absence. I moved, if you could tell, so I now live in an apartment with my boyfriend, but he is out of town right now. And we still have Levi in the background. Also, my bookshelf's right here, and it's so beautiful, and I'm so proud of it, but like the lighting just doesn't work with having it in the background, which I think looks the best. I don't know, I'll have to figure out if there's ever gonna be a way that I can film in front of it because it's so beautiful. I will be showing you guys kind of a little tour of it. I could only bring about half my books from my mom's house, so it's not that many books that I have here, but it'll grow. I'll probably have to get another bookshelf at some point. Today I wanted to talk about the books I read in August. So I'm actually really proud of myself. I read 8 books in August, which might not sound like a lot, but it's a lot for me. I actually read the first 7, the first like 2 weeks in August, and then I moved, and then work was just too much and I did not have time to read, so I only read 1 book in the second half of the month. I was hoping I could read like 15 books, but yeah, that just didn't happen. Most of them are like 3 stars, couple 4s, couple 5s, and they're kind of all over the place. I have a really random selection this month, so let's get started. The first book that I read in August was The 20th Train. This is the true story of the ambush of the death train to Auschwitz. So I picked this up on a whim at the used bookstore. It was $4, and I ended up giving this book, I gave 3 stars to, which it's so hard to rate nonfiction writing, especially like biographies or autobiographies. Like, how do you rate someone's life? You know, it's just, it's really difficult, but I did give this one a 3 stars. So I read other reviews about this book, and other people feel the same, that like the first 3/4 of the book, the majority of the book, is just so detail heavy and brings up, I think it was originally written either in German or Polish, so it has been translated, and there's just so many names of cities and people and just so much information that it's extremely overwhelming to read. Then you finally get to the ambush part of the story, and it's amazing. Like, if it was just those last like 50 pages, I would have given it a 5 out of 5 because it is such an incredible story. So we mainly follow 3 of the people that really went through with this mission of stopping this train. So main person is Yura Lifchitz. Sorry, don't know how to pronounce that. He was a young doctor, resistance fighter. He got a couple of his friends to help him literally ambush this train. So they basically like stopped the train long enough and like opened some of the train doors, and a lot of people were able to get out because this train was headed to Auschwitz, so they were probably going to end up being murdered. And it was absolutely incredible. Towards the end, it talks about some of the people that were rescued. It ends up being like in the hundreds. They were able to escape through these open doors. It's incredible. I really liked the ending part of the story, but getting there was really painful. But I did enjoy this book. I think it was a really amazing story, and one I didn't know about before reading this. Okay, and then I read Where the Crawdads Sing by Owens. Of course. I was so tired of hearing people talk about it that I just had to read it finally. So I got it off Amazon, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Who would have thought? I think we all know what this is about by now. This follows Kaya Clark, our main character. She's kind of known as the Marsh Girl. She grows up kind of on this shack along the North Carolina coast. And she originally lives there with her mother, her father, and her siblings. Eventually her mother leaves, and so do her siblings. So it's just her and her father for a while. Her dad sucks. He's like an alcoholic. He ends up leaving for like days, weeks on end when she's a little kid. So she very much is like by herself most of her childhood and young adulthood, and takes that opportunity to learn all about the plants and animals and fungus around her. She's a really smart individual. So we follow her most of the story, and then kind of in the main town, there's this murder of like the football star from high school. Everyone thinks that it's the Marsh Girl, you know? And so there's a whole murder mystery in it. There's love, there's finding yourself, It's just a coming of age story that is so incredible. I loved it as well as everyone else in the world. So highly recommend, 5 out of 5, loved it. On that same note, then I read The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I don't have it with me, my mom is borrowing it and reading it. So 5 out of 5. Yeah, I see why everyone talks about it. It's a really big book. I think it's over 500. On my day off one day, I picked it up at like 10 a.m. and started it. And then I finished it that same day at 6 p.m. So it took me about 8 hours to read. I just could not put it down. It was lovely. So it follows these two sisters in France. One is a bit older, her name's Vivian, and then the younger one is Isabelle. And they live in France during World War II. And they are part of the resistance, and especially Isabelle, she is very rebellious and does her own thing and doesn't let other people tell her what to do. She's amazing and incredible, so she takes it upon herself to really be part of the resistance fighting against the Germans. And then Vivian is a little bit more subdued. She has a husband and a kid, and her husband does go off to war, and so her house is kind of like rented out to German officers. She doesn't really have a choice, so that's a really interesting part of the war to read about. They basically have just like completely different stories, but they're both incredible. I ugly cried, like sobbed at the end of this novel. I can't even tell you how disgusting I looked. It broke my heart. I have not cried over a book like that in a really long time, so just like forewarning. I mean, it's about World War II, so like it's gonna be sad, but I absolutely loved it. I also loved Kristen Hanna's The Great Alone, but I think I liked The Nightingale more. Incredible, 5 out of 5. Highly recommend picking up The Nightingale. Okay, next book I read in August is The Red Leather Diary, Reclaiming a Life Through the Pages of a Lost Journal by Lily Koppel. So I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars, which this one has a little bit of a lower rating on Goodreads, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. So it is kind of a true story. Lily finds this diary that belongs to a woman named Frances. She lives in New York. Her apartment building is getting rid of a bunch of old suitcases and stuff, and so she goes through them and finds this journal. And it is amazing. So it's this woman named Florence. It's her journal. Unfortunately, she did pass away, but at the time that Lily finally caught up to Florence, she was 90 years old. I think she was living in Florida. And so I was kind of nervous of how Lily would I didn't want it to be too interview-ish, but ends up that Florence remembers all of her childhood and young adolescence growing up. So there's a lot of different stories and details and so many pictures. It's incredible. Anyways, the diary takes place, I think, when Florence is 14 to 19, I want to say, living in New York City during the 1920s. Cue Great Gatsby. Great Gatsby is one of my favorite stories, and it just, what a time. I know a lot of shit was going on in the world, but it's just so magical. And she came from a very wealthy family. Her mom was a dressmaker, and so she's living the high life in New York City, and it is so fun to read about. She is so just independent and so non-apologetically herself. It is so amazing to read about her life. She was just exploring everything, and it was really, really amazing. So yeah, I give it 4 out of 5 stars. I would definitely recommend reading it if you're obsessed with that golden era. It was such a fun book. So that's The Red Leather Diary. Okay, the next book I read was The Death of Evic Og. Now, so I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. I really struggled with this book. I even struggle finding the words to talk about it. It takes place in Nigeria, and we open up to Evic Og's mother finding his body dead on her front doorstep. And so the rest of the book, you're kind of wondering how he got killed. It's kind of leading there. But what I really struggle with this book is that he has a cousin named Osita, and it's mainly from his viewpoint. There's other viewpoints as well in this book, but most of it is Osita's, which I found not great because we didn't really get to see a lot of Vivek's thoughts and what he was going through. We have little snapshots, but I don't know, I just really couldn't get into this book, which is really unfortunate because it's been so highly anticipated and people were really excited about it, and I was really excited about it, but I don't know, I couldn't get there, and I felt like it was just, it never like got rolling, like it was just always hard for me to pick up and keep reading. Almost DNF'd it, but I gave it a 3-star. I was really considering a 2, but I just feel so mean giving out 2 stars, so that's the Death of Evic Og. I really don't know what else to say about it, so there's that. And then I read Atomic Love by Jenny Fields. This takes place in 1950 in Chicago, and we follow our main girlie, Rosalind Porter. And so during World War II, she was a huge part of the Manhattan Project. She was a really smart scientist and kind of helped create the atomic bombs. At the time, she did not know that they were going to be used, like what they were going to be used for. So when she found out that, hey, these atomic bombs were used, you know, in Japan, and she felt very responsible and that she was the one who killed like hundreds of thousands of people. So she really struggles with that part of her life, and during the project she also fell in love with a very smart man as well. And so fast forward to 1950, which is when most of this takes place, she one day realizes that she's being stalked, so she finally talks to this man, and he's like, hey, we think that you know this man who was the scientist that she like fell in love with. So from there, it's a crazy whirlwind. I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars as well. Nothing about it was bad. I just needed there to be a few steps up. Like, I just wanted something more from it. I do love how this book talked about love. It is kind of a love triangle sort of thing. Hello? It's just a book that I don't think I'll remember. Like, I don't think it's really gonna stick with me. I was really hoping it would because it's like pretty much all of my favorite things wrapped up into one, but I just, again, didn't really do it for me. So 3 out of 5 stars. 7th book I picked up in August is Barracoon, The Story of the Last Black Cargo. This is by Zora Neale Hurston. I was so excited to pick this up. I really had never heard about it before, and I just wanted to educate myself further. So this takes place, so this is kind of interview style as well. Hurston travels to Alabama in 1927, and she interviews this man who is Cujo Lewis. That's not his real name, he has a bunch of different names that I can't remember, but he gives his kind of first-hand account of how he was taken from his home in Africa. Also, I can't remember where. I'm the worst with details. He was born in West Africa, in Benin. Okay, so yeah, he was taken with about 100 other people, and they were brought over illegally, and at this point, it's 1927. She travels down to Alabama where he's living, and he talks about his life growing up, and it's an incredible story. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars as well. I really enjoyed it. Hurston talks about how she keeps the dialect, like how he talks in the novel. Like, it's not just like simple English, you know, it's kind of how he talks, which I think added a lot to this story. It did take a little bit longer to read just because you kind of had to wrap your mind around what certain words were, but I think that was really special that she added that. Again, it does include some pictures, but the actual story that he tells is kind of short. Like, a majority of this book is like index and glossary and kind of more information on the history of slavery, which is of course important, and I still read, but I do wish that his story was a little bit longer. But of course he was hesitant to talk about some things because of course it's a hard thing to talk about, so I get it. But I really enjoy this book. I think it's so important. I think everyone just needs to learn more about the history of slavery and how our country grew up on it, how our country was literally founded on it. So amazing 4 out of 5 book, highly recommend. Last book I read in August, which took 2 weeks to read, was The Scent Keeper. I picked this up on a whim as well. I thought it'd be magical. Also, I've been talking for so long, I'm gonna quickly talk about this book. I gave it 3 out of 5. It really wasn't anything special. We follow our main girl, Emmeline, and she grows up with her father on this really secluded island, literally doesn't see another human being for years, and then one day she does. She hears a boat. He's also makes like scent papers. He has this machine that like puts smells onto a paper and bottles them up, and you smell it and you're transported. It sounded all very magical. But when she hears this boat and sees another human being, kind of everything, that like spell is broken. This book really isn't as magical as I thought it would be. So I don't think it's a spoiler, but her father dies, and so she's taken away from this island and kind of lives in the real world for most of the book, and is just trying to figure out all the secrets of her childhood and like who her mother was, and is just trying to find herself and kind of what these scent papers were all about. And it's an adventure story. It just wasn't really for me. I got really bored really fast. I thought it kind of dragged out. I don't know if it's because it took me 2 weeks to read, but I just never looked forward to picking it up and reading it. So I don't know if that's my fault or not, but 3 out of 5 stars. Wasn't my favorite. I was wishing for something a little bit more magical. It was fine. Like it was a fine book, you know? So, wow. Those are the 8 books that I read in August. I'm really excited for September. I'm hoping to kind of keep this ball rolling and keep reading a lot. Let me know your favorite book you read in August. I would love to know, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye guys!